Hello friends, today's video we're going to be taking my client that has dark hair and we're going to chop her hair off and well, not all of it, but we're going to give her this really pretty mushroom beigey blonde lighter brown hair color.
Okay, so I'm getting ready to go do my client. She has very dark hair naturally, probably like a level 2. I had quoted her for a partial, which is what she's wanting, for $280 for a partial and $400 starting prices for a full. That includes a haircut. We're gonna have to take a couple of inches off of her ends because they're pretty dry, but she wants to have like caramely highlights. But I think because of how thick her hair is, we're gonna keep that a little bit rootier. I'm gonna go through and use my Foilayage Big Papa foils because they're a lot larger, and to try and get her the coverage that she's wanting, I think I'm gonna go through and do like these really big foils all over, really big, like probably like chunkier weaves just to get her like heavier, like more dimensional brightness. If I go through with like my smaller foils and do like all this fine detailed work, like I don't think she's gonna feel as bright because I'm not gonna be able to put as many foils in because we're just doing a partial. So just going through with like the smaller foils, I don't think will give her very much. So going through with the larger foils and trying to like get more coverage with less work, I think will probably give her like a better result that she's wanting. And she's just gonna let her hair grow out. So I think she wants to stay rootier. She wants like a money piece, but she wants it rootier just so that way she can let it grow without feeling like she has to come back in, because it's been a year since her last one. So that's our goal for today.
For lightening her hair, I'm going to be using Schwarzkopf Blonde with 20 volume and Olaplex. My client doesn't come in very often to the salon, and so we talked about how does she want her highlights to be around her face, and she wants to have minimal grow out. So where normally I start doing my application around the hairline because I want to make sure that I can do the detailed work around the face that I want to do. So because we're not doing anything tight around her hairline except for a back comb money piece, I'm now going to start her service in the back of the head. I'm doing quite a bit larger sectioning than I normally would do. Like I said, if you watched where I was talking just before, we're just doing a partial foil, and because of that, I have limited work and time that I can do for this client. And so I want to do like a big impact for minimal foiling work, minimal application, because of the price range that we established, which again, I talked about before if you missed it. So because of that, I want to go in with a heavier hand, a heavier weave and sectioning to make sure that I can give her the brightest pieces with like the least amount of work. And so that's why I'm using my Big Papa foils by Foilayage. Because normally when I would go in for a client in these sectioning, if I was using my smaller foils, I would have to like separate this into 2 different sections or even 3 different sections sometimes. So having my Big Papa foils really helps to be able to go in there with like a very large section that I normally wouldn't be able to do. And instead of doing like 4 or 5 foils in these next few sections, I'm really only having to do 2. Also, keep in mind that my client's goal is not to be the brightest blonde. And because of that, I'm doing thicker sectioning when I'm doing her application. If she wanted to be really bright blonde, then you would see me take the super fine weaves, really thin slices, super thin sectioning. That way I can get massive lift. But because we're trying to go for something a little bit softer, a little bit more beigey, mushroomy, I'm okay with taking thicker sections because it's okay if all we get to is like a level 8-9 lift. I also know for her budget that we're not going to be able to go in and do a root shadow to blend. And I generally try to stay away from root shadows anyways because I want to prevent as much overlapping as possible, and for a client to get their hair bleached and then do a root shadow, and then the next time they come in, now you have to bleach through that root shadow again, that could potentially cause damage. So I try to do as good of blending as I can before I even put the lightener on. I want to make sure that I'm back combing heavily. You can see when I'm going through and doing her sectioning, I'm doing some zigzags. That way it will kind of, when her hair falls down, she'll have like strands that will break it up that were zigzagged out of the section. So you'll see in my application that I'm trying so hard to not have to go through and do a root shadow. If we have to, we will, but luckily we didn't have to because I try to make sure that my work is good beforehand instead of doing sloppy work and then having to go through and fix my work. And I'm not saying that if you have to use a root shadow that your work is sloppy. I just mean that there are some people that I see, and it gives me anxiety, where they literally just go through and do like a huge slice and like slap the bleach on and then fix it with a smudge. And my take on that is eventually your root shadow is going to fade. And what is going to happen? They're going to have a hard line of demarcation. The blend is not going to be good. They're going to have to come back sooner. My intention is for my client to be able to go however long and it still looks like a good color months later because the blend is really nice and it just grows out nicely on its own. As I'm getting closer up to the top section of her hair, I'm taking thinner sections. You'll notice that my section that I'm doing right now, you can kind of see through to the foil, and that's because as I'm getting to the top, I'm trying to do more detailed work now. Before I was just trying to like get thicker foils in there, thicker sectioning in the foils, trying to get her overall lighter with less foil work. But now since we're getting to the top, I want to make sure that this is going to be what like shows on her hair. So I want to make sure that it looks good. Not that the rest isn't going to look good, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to make extra sure. I want to make sure that it's exactly lightened exactly how I want it to be, and it's not too chunky. It's a little bit easier to go heavy-handed underneath because her hair is going to fall on top of it. So she's not going to see, you know, as it grows out, if there's like a heavier line or, you know, I'm not saying it's not blending, you guys. I'm just saying, like, I want to make sure that the top foils are impeccable, okay? I want to make sure that it's a little bit more blended and not like a chunkier weave and just, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to do a good job. So you'll see me do some like more like blended pieces, and then you'll also see me do some like more, like this one has more defined weaves. And that's because I want her hair to be able to have like different variations of dimension. I want her to notice like she has some like more defined brighter pieces, or even the top layer that it will like blend a little bit more since it's right on top. So that's it. All right, so I'm sectioning away the very top section of her hair that's going to fall over, which I call the veil, because that's like the hair that is going to be the most detailed work, because that's what's going to lay on top. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing really fine weaves, blending that. I keep saying blending it a lot better than before. You guys, are the blends blending? Because if they're not blending, then your client's not going to be happy because they want to be rooty. Okay? So you'll see that her foils, as I get to the very top, when I do her veil, I'm doing a finer weave. You'll notice that there's some pieces that are like almost see-through. And that's because she wants to stay rooty. She wants to be able to let her hair grow out. and not like have it, essentially not have grow out. Essentially, I want my hair to grow out and not see that I have roots coming in. And the way that you accomplish that is by still going up into the root area with the finest foils and backcomb heavily. I feel like when clients say that they want to be rooty, that doesn't mean that they just want to have their dark roots. I think that means that they want to have their natural color be what they mainly see, with like little sprinkles of dimension here and there. So unless some, like I just had a client recently say, I asked her, do you absolutely not want me to put anything in your root area? Do you want this top part to fall and not have absolutely any lightener through your roots and truly be just your natural color? And she said yes. So sometimes you have to be that specific with a client, because or else they might feel like, where's the color? Where's the highlights? It's everything's underneath and I don't see anything. And so, you know, they'll see it when they have movement in their hair maybe, but you need to really ask clients and be that specific and say, okay, you're telling me that you want to be rootier. Does that mean that you don't want any highlights up in your root area? Or do you just want it to blend so much that there's just a minimal dimension, but we're still breaking up your roots a little bit so that you're not just super rooty? And so, because sometimes the clients will come in with a picture and they'll be like, I like how dark she is in the root. Well, when we zoom into those pictures and we can see that there's a soft amount of dimension, we have to point that out. Well, do you see how she has a little, just teeny little strands through her hair? It looks like it's just dark and rooty, but truly she does have just a little bit of dimension maybe. So in those pieces, like just take like little slivers of hair and backcomb it, and that will give you like the tiniest little dimension that they want, instead of feeling like clients might still want to feel like their roots are broken up a little bit more, and not just like solid dark. So I hope that helps. That was like super long and drawn out, but I hope it helps. I'm going to go through and paint through her ends. I know that she came in with a lot of grow out and her ends were already lightened, but do you know the difference when you see old standard highlights and you can see the even dimension between like the bleached hair and then the natural hair? That's kind of what her hair looks like through the ends. It looks like she had old highlights that have just grown out, and you can see where the old highlights were and then where her natural hair was, and the blonde, brown, whatever. And I don't want her hair to look like that. I want it to look like it's evenly blended, where she has a soft like ombre in through her ends. And I want there to be overall lightness through the ends of her hair, instead of like being able to see the darker strands. So that's why, even though she's already brighter through the ends, that's why I'm going through and re-lightening through the ends, because I want to get rid of that old highlight look. So that's why we're going through her ends still. Okay, we're finishing painting through that veil I was talking about earlier, so you can see that this is a much thinner section than the previous foils that I had done. So this is going to be like minimal highlights going through her root area. Now we're going to go through and do her money piece, which she did want it to be brighter on her money piece. However, she doesn't want it to be bright like directly up to her roots throughout her whole hairline. So I'm going to go through and do these first weaves and back comb them pretty heavily. And this very, very first foil, I'm going to go up into her, basically all the way up to the scalp. But because it's a finer weave, and you can see she already has those little baby hairs that's on her forehead, and then also we backcombed it. So even though we're going directly up into her hairline and her scalp on her forehead, it's not going to look that drastic. It's still going to be like a softer blend. And then as I'm doing these foils, I'm going to do, I think I do like 3 foils. Every foil that I'm doing after the first one that's tight up to the scalp, I'm still heavily backcombing, but you'll see that especially when I get to the very last foil, I'm not going as far up into the roots. I want to make sure that it kind of has like a gradual, like softer blend to being a little bit higher up at the scalp, and then softly like blending into more of a dropped root in her money piece. So that last one, you could see I just barely foiled up into an inch of her roots. And then this one, took a thicker section, I'm back combing it and I'm pulling it forward, and then I'm still also not going to go as tight up into the foil. So because I'm over directing this foil to larger section and I'm pulling it forward, that's going to create more of a natural shadow on its own. And then, but you have to like really back comb this a little bit more, or else you're going to get like a hard line from having a thicker section. So make sure that you're back combing that. And you can see there's much more drag on that last foil. So she's going to have more of a blended money piece. And this is where she always parts her hair. And so I'm starting off right where she parts, and I'm just taking really fine foils. I'm doing a really fine weave. I'm backcombing it pretty heavily, and I want to make sure that this matches where we did that veil in the back section of her head. So I'm doing a much finer weave on these very first few foils that are directly where her part falls. That's because I want to make sure that I know exactly where her part is. She's going to have the same amount of lightness all over. Sometimes if you start underneath and work your way up, you kind of lose sight of where their part falls and where the hair is going to lay exactly. So for her, and because of her hair being like so dark naturally, I wanted to go through and do these foils first on her part. That way it can start lightening, because if you start underneath, it's got more time to process, but then it also has the insulation from the heat of her hair laying on top of it is going to cause it to process a lot faster anyways. And then by the time you get to the top of her scalp, the top of her head, those underneath foils are pretty much going to be done processing, and then you still got like a long way to go with these top foils. So I sometimes like to start at the very top for one. That way I know exactly what I'm doing, what her part's going to look like. But especially with dark hair, that way it starts processing right now, and then it has a little bit longer to process by the time I get to the underneath. And then the underneath is going to catch up to the top because it has the heat that's from all the hair laying on top of it. So that's like a big tip for me. If you feel like when you do darker hair, but the top section, or it's never as bright as the rest of the hair, it's because it doesn't have the insulation from the heat of the hair laying on top of it. So I don't like putting my clients under a heater. I know a lot of people do that. I don't like doing that because I feel like that heat is just so directed into one spot on the head on the very top. It's not evenly distributed, and then it can cause over processing. So I don't like doing that. The most I'll do is put a towel on top of the head and hit it with the blow dryer for like 30 seconds or something. But that's just why I like doing my foils on top first, especially with dark hair. Give it that extra time so it can process a little bit faster. And then when you go back through and check your foils, if you're still stuck at like a level 7 or 8, especially if they're wanting to go actually brighter blonde, at that point you can go and make like a bowl of 30 volume and just apply it where you need to if you feel like you're not getting the lift that you're wanting. And then within like 10 minutes, you're going to be to a nice bright blonde again. So that's my tip for dark hair that wants to go bright blonde. Don't use 30 unless it's like the last 10 minutes, and then boom, you're there. Okay, so for her sections, now that I'm flip-flopping back and forth. I want to make sure that I'm doing the same foils and the same subsections on either side of the head. So you'll notice that I'm doing one side, going to the other, doing 1 or 2 foils on one side, going to another. I like to make sure that I have even distribution of like time and heat and processing and all of that stuff. If I do one whole section of the head and then I go to the other side, that one side's going to be halfway done processing before I even start the other side. That stresses me out. It gives me anxiety. Sorry, I'm panicking just thinking about it. Also, like, I don't remember exactly what I do every time. Like, every person's different. So it's not like I have a standard foil pattern that I use where I'm going to remember, oh, I do this on this side and that on that side. I want to make sure that like I'm doing the same thing. So that's why I go back and forth to this side then that side, because I want to make sure I'm doing the same foil as I did on that side as I did on this side. Instead of being like, oh crap, did I do a weave or a slice on that one, or did I do a weave back to back, or whatever. So that's why if you see me go back and forth, that's the reason why. This is totally not a partial foil. What was I thinking? Like, honestly, when I went through and I started doing her hair, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this video and I'm going to be like, my thumbnail was going to be overall brightness with minimal work, less than 15 foils. Whatever. Like, that did not happen. I still did basically a heavy full foil on her. I went through and I counted the foils. I did like 30 some foils. This is not a partial, people. Sorry. I was thinking I'd go through with my big papa foils in the back and do maybe like 3 or 4 foils in the back, 4 foils on like either side of the head, and then like 1 or 2 in the money piece. So what is that? 4, 8, 12, 15, 16. What? I did twice the work. This is not a partial. This is a full. But I still had to charge her accordingly because we already established her price quote. And I'm the dumbass that always overworks myself. But she was happy in the end and it looks good. And please don't forget to like and subscribe, because I overworked myself and didn't charge what I should have been able to charge, because I already quoted her, but I just did too much work than I should have. So please help a girl out and like and subscribe, so that way I can get, you know, come back even on one way or another. I'm sorry, guys. I really shouldn't have to bribe you to like or subscribe my videos to my channel. I feel like I need to, though. Okay, bye. Again, for going underneath her hair, these very underneath foils are going to be a little bit brighter to give her an overall lighter appearance. And then as I make my way to the top, you'll notice that I'm starting to do more finer weaves, but I'm still backcombing a lot. And all of that is going to give her a nice blend. and keep her a little bit rootier in the top section, especially so that way she has a little bit of dimension, but still maintains her natural root color. And then I'm going to go through and paint through the ends. One tip also for painting through the ends is I didn't do it in the back section because I know those were going to sit for a long time. But make sure when you paint through the ends, go through and fold your foils up and tuck them underneath the scalp foils. And that's going to insulate heat and cause them to brighten up. Have you ever gone through and done a foil, especially like if it's trying to be like a brighter blonde, and then you do like the painted tips, and then when you go to pull the foils, your scalp foils are like a nice bright blonde, and then your ends are stuck at like a level 8, 9. And that's because the ends obviously don't process as nicely as the scalp foils because it doesn't have the heat like the foils on the head do. So one tip that you can do is to tuck your foils underneath the foils that are along the head. Tuck your painted ends up and clip them between your scalp foils. That way they're insulated and have the heat from the scalp, and then that will process them a lot faster, and then they should match up with your root foils. And that's what we're doing here. I'm just going to do a few of them on either side, and then you'll see that I pin them up, and then I'm going to let her process for probably like 30 minutes, come through and check her foils. I'm going to go, you can see some of those pieces I didn't paint through her ends because I didn't want to damage her hair. So the last like 10 minutes of her processing, I'm going to go through and pull bleach all the way through her ends to brighten up where I need to. And then I'm going to put a towel on top of her head because I said it already, like I don't like putting her under heat. But that towel really helps insulate and warm her foils up. So she's just going to process like that for the full 30, 35, 40 minutes. Okay, at this point, she's been processing for about an hour in the back. So before I let her just sit for the remainder of the processing time for the front, I want to go through and check these foils in the back since these have been sitting for so long and retouch them with lightener if I need to, especially like these top sections because, you know, it doesn't have as much insulation from the foil, from the hair sitting on top and through the ends. So I want to go through and run some bleach back through her hair, retouch up her blonde if I feel like it's not processing as fast as I need it to. You'll see as I work my way down a few foils how much lighter these ones are getting because it has those foils sitting on top, and so it's processing a lot longer or a lot faster because it has the heat of those other foils. So, and from her scalp. So look at how much more blonde, I don't know if I showed you, sorry. But those other foils are a lot blonder. So these ones, I reapplied bleach to them. I'm checking the rest of her hair. Oh, there we go with the towel. And then now, because I've reapplied bleach where I needed to, she can sit for that 30 minutes. So here she is after she's done processing for that 30 minutes. I'm going through, running bleach through her ends where I need to, pulling foils where I need to, and I still have the towel on the front section because that's not done processing yet. So we're just going to pull these foils out and then check the top when we're done. Also, I want to say that before I was pulling these foils out, I did go through the whole top section and I blasted some of the top existing or top exposed foils out with some heat from the blow dryer. I go through, hit them with the blow dryer one at a time, and then after that I put the towel on to insulate the heat. And so that is also a really big thing that helps finish processing those foils to match up with the ends of the with the rest of the hair. And here's her hair after we rinsed it out. You can see that she's still nice and rooty, but those ends are still kind of warm, so we need to tone her hair. The majority of my formulation is going to be 7-00 and 7-4 and just a little bit of that 9-1 to make sure that it doesn't grab too dark, and I want to give it a little bit of an ash to cool it down just slightly so that it's not too warm of a caramely tone, but so that it has some softer warmth to it. You know what I'm talking about? Some warm tones can be too warm, so having that ash in there just gives it that perfect cooler warm tone, a softer beige, like that perfect mushroom color, if that's what you guys want to call it again. But anyways, here's the after. I hope you guys liked this video. I think this tone was perfect. She was super happy with her hair, and it blends with her roots really nicely. She's still rooty and just have a little bit of dimension going through the top of her crown area. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you like this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.